everybody. Welcome to The Scoop. I'm Farah.
And I'm Nicole.
And this episode is on our value teamwork. Here's our lovely shirts that so I have we is greater than me. What does yours say?
Says together everyone achieves more. And it spells
Team.
team.
Yay! That's awesome. So I think what's so important about this one, that we were kind of talking about just a second ago, is communication is so important to have effective teamwork. That's maybe part of my opinion too. But Nicole, do you want to go over like the book that we've been reading and the five dysfunctions and that kind of stuff of teamwork?
I
I think
would
that's
love to, if you don't
that's
mind
good.
that I read probably some sections of it.
Do it.
But some of us were reading The Five Dysfunctions of a Team, which I have found that quite a few people know this book, and at a corporate level, do read it, which was really interesting because a couple of people kind of saw, like in my family and things like that, kind of saw me reading it. We're like, "Oh, I know that book." I'm like, "Oh, that's great."
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
so I found it fascinating. I love how it was written because it was written in like a story format. That's my interpretation, versus like a academic kind of book, which made it like a really easy read, and I was able to relate to the characters that they described in the book. So that was just really cool. So it's a really easy read if anyone wants to look into that. My favorite part was that they have this like team assessment at the end of the book. And so it's really quick. It just goes through what, 15 questions, and then it's a Likert scale. So it's like three usually, two sometimes, one rarely. And it goes through all the five kind of like dysfunctions. So the dysfunctions are absence of trust, fear of conflict, lack of commitment, avoidance of accountability, and inattention to results. So those are the five that they talked about.
Mhm.
I think they all relate, and um I can see where in teams these things might be lacking and why they are. Um and how important they are to establish collaboration, common goals, to move forward with productivity and problem solving and all those things that you want in teams.
Mhm. For sure. You know what's interesting? This has nothing to do with this, but it has a special tribute to teamwork at the end. And did you notice that the author said that the completion of this book, the horrible events of September 11th, occurred, and that like we're is in a few days? I think that's kind of ironic.
Wow.
Sorry. That's
Yeah.
very interesting. I didn't see that part. Anyway, that had nothing to do with this, but it's just ironic. Yeah, I agree. It was a story, like you said, and I put somebody in every character.
Mhm.
Um, and I even bounced certain people in and out, it was very interesting and very easy, like you said, to read. And um, yeah, I think you could read it again and see other stuff. It's
Mhm.
one of those books that like you would read and read it how you read it, and then you go back through and then you pick up another part. Because there was a couple of chapters that I reread. I was a little distracted, or just I thought, I'm gonna read that again. And I went back through. I talked about this with James, some of it. And so we would go back and kind of look at it too and see perspectives of that chapter, or what have you. So I know this is something we need to talk about too, again, because life happens and we get on to our next thing as far as topics and priorities. But this is one that I think is just so important, because accountability is one of our other values, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I think we see either people that hit conflict right on and they're like I mean, we had this conversation last week in a different way of, okay, in the form of feedback, right? So we've talked about where somebody may come up and say, okay, so this is what I'm seeing, what's going on with this, whatever, it's very direct and just like constantly talking about it
Mhm.
and how that can be. Where does that fall in this book, would you say, Nicole, as far as that goes? Because we've talked about
Conflict.
that. Yeah, yeah, the conflict as far as like feedback and, constantly hearing about it. We had this conversation, and even in our leadership meeting with the colors,
Yeah.
I'm curious what you think about that now that we're looking at this.
Yeah, it's interesting because like the book also it states like these bullet points of when there is teams that fear conflict. So if you fear conflict, you're having boring meetings, you're creating environments where back channel politics or personal attacks thrive. You're ignoring conversational topics that are critical to team success. You fail to tap into all opinions and perspectives of team members. You waste time and energy with posturing and interpersonal risk management. However, teams that engage in conflict, as we've talked about, like what is healthy conflict. And when you do have this present, you have lively, interesting meetings. You extract the ideas of all team members. You solve real problems quickly. You minimize politics, and you put critical topics on the table for discussion. And I think that when there is healthy conflict, then there's also healthy feedback.
Ah,
And what I mean by that is that the feedback is something that you can use and move forward with and talk about perspectives and do something with. I think that there's a difference between like what I would consider like unhealthy feedback would be things that maybe don't or are not going to go anywhere because maybe it's name calling, or maybe it's assuming, or maybe it's judgment. And when those things are involved in the feedback, it's really hard to take it as like a performance evaluation, or to take it as like constructive. It becomes more negative in nature, and the negativity piece makes it really hard. Like think about it, like if someone doesn't know you and they assume that you did X, Y, and Z, that would be really hard to take that initially, at least, and like self-reflect on it and look back on it and see what accountability you can take from that and move forward. um, Accountability also is huge when it comes to conflict, because if no one takes accountability for the pieces within there, then it just kind of sits there and it does become this negative area.
so I don't remember from the book, but mm, didn't it say something about separating the person from the task? Was that this book?
Yeah, it did. It talked
Okay.
about, yeah, so separating, yeah, because it wasn't about and it's kind of how you phrase things too. Like it's not you didn't do X, Y, and Z. It's that this task did not get done. So it takes the person out of it a little bit and says, okay, but this task did not get done. So how do we make sure that that gets done? Like, does it need to be altered? Does it, like, what does that look like in itself?
Okay. Yeah, because I know that's some of the things we're working through now too, and some of the um, future goals will be on the system
Mhm.
versus the people and the personalities. So the system runs versus Nicole is this or Farah is this or this person is this, or reacts this way or feels this way. It's really about the system, and about the tasks and about the goal. And
Yeah.
so I think that that's really good. I should probably read some of these chapters again. It's just so it's because I mean, there's just so much. I mean, we are so full of growth mindset. We're always wanting to learn. We keep kind of checking each other with like, okay, like even our conversation on Friday was like, we don't want people to think that it's a whole nother thing that they have to learn. it's still the same. It's just, again, enhancing what we already know and maybe even just saying it differently. I think about like when I'm at the gym and I have different coaches and they're telling me to do something, sometimes they just say it a little bit different that makes more sense than maybe the other guy, or it just clicks differently because, you know, that's just how it is. Sometimes it just clicks because you said it this way versus that. That's how I see this is it's everything. We still go back to reflection and then, what's actually being present. How does our body feel in those moments? Are we being triggered? What do we do when we're being triggered? We might pause. We might have to wait. And then being objective, going back to being objective versus this horrible track that you make that you let your mind go through because you're taking on a whole persona of like events that didn't even occur. I think that's we're all really good at that, right?
Yeah.
Because this happened or that happened. Oh, I bet you that's why that happened. So and being realistic that that is going to always happen at some point. So we have to kind of come back and be able to talk directly to each other in a way that is bidirectional and about, I think, again, coming back to the task and about what's happening so that it all comes together. The one thing that I think, and it feels good when that happens, right? It feels really good when the team comes together. And I think about that one incident that happened a couple weeks ago where there was like 7 people that were a part of one result. And man, did that feel good because everybody did their part. We all communicated. And then at the end, the result was also very reinforcing because it ended in the way that we wanted it to end. Um, it was somebody that had gotten hurt. So, I just think, do you remember that? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. How amazing was that though? Because everybody kind of did their part and it just really was a perfect scenario. That's like the teamwork. The result was this. I have to do my part, you have to do your part, right? That's kind of what the book says, right? Am I saying that right?
Mhm.
What's your feelings or your thoughts and your observations on that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I like how you say it's like the system because there can be a system for the productivity, there can be a system for the problem solving. It could be the same system, but it equals all these things, is what I'm trying to say. Is that like if you follow that system, then all of the benefits of teamwork can be achieved. So there's increased productivity, there's enhanced problem solving, there's improved morale, there's greater like creativity, there's skill development, all those pieces. Um, and being able to like talk about it. So that's where that conflict piece comes in, is like if you're okay with healthy conflict and that not all of us are going to see it a different way. And it's not because I'm this way and you're that way. But
Right.
coming back to the team and being able to work through that like together, the like synergy piece of that.
Well, in fact, because you're that way and I'm this way, it makes it better. I think that's the
Yeah.
way that I look at it is, we could see something different and that's great. That we do see different perspectives or we come from different departments or I come from I don't know, like I walk in and you're like, we really need this training. And I'm like, okay, well, that's great, but we can't do it today. Or if we do it or this week or this month, if we do, then we have to look at another area that we take from because we can't either, it's not in the budget right now, or we don't have the time. A good example is Alice training right now that I'm going through is like we do have a budget, we do have a timeline because it's important that everybody's trained. And so here's all the options. What do you guys want to do? What's the most important and what's the priority? That's a whole teamwork thing, right? Because then I'm like, okay, so we have 3 people we want to train, or 2 people we want to train, or whatever it is, and we want to get them trained in the next month. Let's say that's the goal. Maybe it's not the goal, like, but that's about everybody kind of doing their part. And I might pass the baton to, okay, this is the information. What do you guys think? Everybody gives their perspective because it's going to be different, potentially. and then coming to a conclusion. And that's really cool. Because I think in the past too, and we're still working on this, of course, but in the past, we might have skipped over just to get it done because of what we needed, as a leader doing this versus, okay, how much does it cost? And are these people even available, during that time? Is it going to work? Is that the best person to do it? So I think that's really important too, which is why perspective, which
Mm-hmm.
we're really talking a lot about lately, is perspective and kind of our triggers and our personalities as far as like, not personalities as like it's me or you, but different perspectives within those departments. And what are we calling that? Where it's our colors, but it's kind of like where we're at within those departments too. So I
Yeah,
guess,
I mean, I think it is important to understand what you bring to the team. And because if you understand what you bring to the team, then you're going to understand what others bring to the team and like how you all like work together. So yes, it is like
hmm,
personality traits, but it's not just about that. It's about like what contributions make like the whole team. Like I want people, like for example, like I'm a really like creative, out of the box like thinker. So I'm going to come to the table with this grand idea,
hmm.
and if it's going to work, I need other people on my team who are more detail oriented or who are more like what we call like feelers, like can identify how this is going to make other people feel or at least bring that question to the table. And so you kind of need to make like to make change that is like productive and that meets the solutions that we want. You need those people to all come together
Isn't
because it's all different perspective.
isn't that really part of the system though? So
Yeah.
that's part of, like, that's the system we're trying to create, is that you do see the different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
So if we have all, we're right now dealing with colors or labeling with colors, but let's say we had all gold people or all orange people or all feelers, it would be very lopsided and we wouldn't get to what we need to get to in the end because it's very different. And you can tell, like before we even when we went into, okay, there's four colors, right? It's four colors. I mean, we all looked around and said, we know where everyone pretty much is without even doing this, because it's just quite obvious for the most part. So I think that's very interesting and why we've adjusted staffings and team meetings and, just meetings in general with the company so we can get those different perspectives versus run away and say like, well, that person's going to be different than me. And they're going to say something totally like that's the healthy conflict that
Yeah.
we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about is, yeah, we do need that person. They're going to say the opposite of me and let's figure out why, and let's get to a mutual ground of, so yeah, I love that. What did Charmaine talk about too? So she talked about coaching versus guiding versus collaboration. I might not be saying.
Yeah, yeah, because there's like a dictatorship.
Yeah.
There's the dictator, there's the coach, and there's the collaborator. And so sometimes you can present all three, and those can be interchangeable, and just recognizing like who you are being in that moment. Because there are things that are like, I know that dictator has like a negative
Hmm.
aspect to it. But that's just how the world has framed it. Really, what it means is that sometimes there is a decision that there is no feedback about, that there is no like other perspective at that time. And it just is what it is. So it is dress code, and this is the dress code, and this is what we're doing, and there is no more like perspective taking on that. And then there's like a coach, and the coach is working with you. It's kind of like, I see it, this is my perspective, I see it as like a teacher, like someone who's like, okay, here's this system. Let me teach you, let me walk you through, let's walk through this together, um, and do this piece. And then there's the collaborator who is like, okay, what do you think about this? Versus like teaching a system, we're saying, okay, well, here's this thing, here's my perspective, what's your perspective? And then maybe moving forward with that.
And I think the way that we have tried to develop is to start with collaboration, go to coaching, and then go to a decision, right? So the
Yeah.
dictator.
Mm-hmm.
I know that that's not everything, but in general, we try to gather the information, the perspectives, and kind of go down the line that way. That's newer for us, I think, to label things like that and to, I mean, I think we still are, because we also, Nicole and I also learned in a board meeting the same kind of thing, and we put different, levels with that. So we've been kind of playing around with that. Uh, but I think that's super important because there is time, if you don't have a leader too, and we talked about this last week too, to take control and say, okay, this is what we're doing after we've gathered information. If we need information, sometimes a budget's a budget, right? This is what we got. This is what we can do. So that's it, and that's just something that's a decision. Or it's the law, like you said. So here we go. What does that look like? But yeah, in general, if we're trying to figure something out, that's kind of the hierarchy that we've taken. So I think staff wise, that's really important to know because that is some of the feedback that we've gotten is you don't hear us or this is how I feel about this or this is what I'm needing or wanting. And I'm like, well, is it a need or a want? And what does that look like? Because guess what? This is the law. This is what we have to do. This is for safety. You got to wear tennis shoes. Period. Like that's safety. There is no ifs, ands, or buts, except maybe for water day. We're gonna let you wear this shoe or something. But in general, like, no, this is what you have to do. Right? Uniform. This is what you have to do. We have already been through this for years and years, and this is what we came up with because it's the best decision with all of the information we've gathered all over the years. Um, so yeah, I think that's all really, really good, and I think I'm really proud of us for getting to these areas of like trying to figure this out. Um, and what's the best way to move forward. So we do hear people, but then we do have to make decisions and move forward. Anything else in the book too that you want to talk about with teamwork?
I mean, I think accountability can like make or break teams. And I know that we talked about accountability as that is a separate value. However, they all kind of like intertwine. So they have like a team that holds one another accountable, which can also go into like the feedback piece too. But it ensures that poor performers feel pressure to improve, and it identifies potential problems quickly by questioning one another's approaches without hesitation. It establishes respect among team members who are held to the same high standards, and it avoids excessive bureaucracy around performance management and corrective action. Um, which I think that when I'm reading these things, I'm like, okay, so if everyone is accountable to me, that does equal teamwork. But it's also about holding one another accountable, and that's okay. However, we've also talked about, which we're going to learn more about, is like the attunement piece, and kind of what I see as like meeting people like where they're at a little bit. So like you want to hold each person on the team accountable, and you also want to make sure that they're ready to receive that feedback and that they can receive that feedback. However, how do you do that when the team as a whole needs to move forward? And so what does that look like? And that I think is something that we're building off of and continuously kind of learning more about.
For sure. Accountability also with time with, and I think the trust factor
Yeah.
is huge. Because, and that's the attunement piece of mismatch when something happens and we're not matching. And so how do we um bring that back? And I think that's what we're figuring out as far as like trust back. So when
Mhm.
there's a mismatch of not seeing perspective, this is kind of how I look at it, is when there's a mismatch, let's say, Nicole, you see it one way, I see it a different way, and we're not communicating about that or trying to be open about, okay, Nicole, what do you see about that? Like what's going on with this? Like what do you, and then you explain it and I go, oh, well, that wasn't my purpose or my intent in that with whatever we're doing. I see what you're saying now. So what I think that also is really important to bring back trust is knowing what the intent and the purpose is. So you can get to the commitment piece, but those perspectives. Because if you don't have trust, it doesn't matter what you say and your teamwork falls short.
Mhm.
Because I don't trust what you're saying because I'm not listening to you or the accountability piece, bringing that back. um, I didn't feel you were accountable or you didn't feel I was accountable. So where do you start? Where do you come back to meeting people where they're at? And that's the mismatch coming back. Where I gotta meet, where are you at, Nicole? What's going on right now? What do you see? And then I have to be willing to do that, just to hear and match you. Where are you at? It's funny because we talk about like reading the room, right? You walk in and you go like, what's going on in here? Something's going on. Like I gotta see what's going on. I gotta see tell me about what just happened. And then you listen to somebody else's perspective and you can fill that all in
Mhm.
versus not. Because I think that's where we fall short when people just shut down.
Yeah.
So that builds back trust. And you can keep doing that because you're gonna, again, when you have a room full of people that have different perspectives and different, I look at it this way, you look at it this way. If you don't listen, your team can never move forward and then you're stuck.
Mhm.
So, very important. I like all that. What else?
I don't know. I mean, I think trust is like a huge piece of it though, because you have to trust that like whatever that the team moves with integrity, I guess. So, and if you don't trust that, then there's always question there. And then how do you move forward with that? Because then tasks might not get done. And instead of trying to figure out why, there is like, oh, well, it becomes that you thing again instead of the task. It becomes about that
Hmm.
person as an individual versus the task itself.
Yeah, and as I'm looking in here, it talks about vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really important too. So on page 201, it will say the role of the leader. So, and this is kind of the things, didn't realize that I was almost regurgitating this last week, but the most important action that a leader must take to encourage the building of a trust and a team is to demonstrate vulnerability first. This requires that a leader risk losing face in front of the team so that subordinates will take the same risk themselves. What is more, team leaders must create an environment that does not punish vulnerability. So I call this mistakes, or I don't know, or that kind of stuff. That's the way I look at that. Even well-intended teams can subtly discourage trust by chastising one another for admissions of weakness or failure. Interesting. And not have it be staged, it says. It's like genuine.
Yeah.
So I think that's so important. And uh, a person said to me the other day when we were talking about this is like vulnerability is almost freeing because you go like, I don't have to know everything. It's okay not to know everything. Like I really don't know. This is what I think. This might be something we could try, but let's look back. Let's look at all the departments. Let's see where we're at. But that was interesting to hear that. I don't think that's hard for you though. Do you think that's hard for you?
I cautiously make that a value of mine though.
Okay, tell me
So
about
when
that.
I'm out of alignment with vulnerability, it means that I'm engaging in my default setting, which is to shut down.
Oh.
So I can recognize when I am shutting down, and
Mhm.
then I will have to kind of there's times, and most recently especially, where I do have to like reset, and I have to say like, hey, like I responded in this way, that wasn't okay, that's out of character for me, and I apologize for that. And for me that is like, I made a mistake, and I'm coming forward to tell you that like I sincerely apologize. Like that was out of character for me. And that's going to happen. Everyone is going to make mistakes or not communicate the way they should have or said the quote unquote wrong thing. I don't think that those things are like wrong though. I think that it's an opportunity to reset and to repair and to move forward. And sometimes that can create stronger relationships. I could have easily been like, yeah, I said that, sorry, and like moved on.
Mhm. That's true. That's true.
But I value like being open and being vulnerable and being like having connection, um, curiosity. Like those are some of my core values. If
Yeah.
they weren't, I don't know, maybe I wouldn't have. I'm not sure.
Well, and from somebody that I don't have any problem saying I don't know, I say it often because there's areas that I have no idea. And I don't really know that I ever really want to know too much about those areas. It's just it's a harder area for me, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with surrounding myself with people that do know those areas. When I look at people that have a stature of I know it all or I know it better than you or something like that, that's when I will avoid because what's the point? If I go up and I want to have an opinion or just a voice in the situation, and that person I know is going to shut me down, what do people do? That person knows it all, so I guess I have anything I say isn't. That's where the whole dictator thing that you gotta have all the other two levels. So there's a
Yeah.
time and a place, but there's also those other two levels of let's talk about this. Um, how do you feel about this, or what's your observation about this? What do you see from that perspective is really important,
Mm-hmm.
and especially for techs coming in is that they want to be able to have some buy-in because they're with the clients 8% of the time or 95% of the time or whatever it is. So, it's important their perspective. They're the ones that are carrying it out day to day, whatever the treatment is. So can we do it? Is
Mm-hmm.
it really logical to be able to do that? Can we, whatever that is? So important. So vulnerability, I think, and being open to, oops, I goofed up or that didn't work, which I do now, right? So that's my biggest thing, I think, for the culture too, in general. I want people to make mistakes because that's how we learn. And we learned other things that I might not have thought of, you might not have thought of that you see that could have been a mistake. And it
Yeah.
worked.
Yeah.
Oh, like I didn't even think about that.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I think that like my mistakes like have grown me as an individual like so much that I welcome that for myself. And I think the vulnerability piece is also welcoming that for others.
agree. And the people that we see that make mistakes are usually the ones that have more connection. If
Mhm.
I'm being open and honest about that, that's usually where you see. And when I've seen people be more like, this is the way that it is, and they step over to being more vulnerable, the world opens up. And I think that's why this other person that I was talking to about this said, it's freeing. Like it's totally freeing to not feel like I have to know everything all
Mhm.
the time. Um, so that makes sense. I can see that from that perspective. So those are the couple of things that I'm looking at. Yeah, so vulnerability, trust. Um, Let me see here. leadership. Yeah, fear of conflict. That's a huge one. Like we talked about that. Oh, lack of commitment. So that's like our intent. Did we say that already? That's
No.
intent, purpose, and commitment. That's like our final thing. One of our biggest trainings was intent, purpose, and commitment. And the commitment piece is okay, so we've talked about what our intention is, let's say with the team. We've talked about the purpose of why we're doing that to make sure we're all like on the same page because there's many different purposes, right? And then, okay, we've talked about it. We've come to maybe a perspective that we all have can agree on or that how to move forward. So what's our commitment to each other? What's that integrity piece of how do we move? What would you say about that piece?
Yeah, I think when we look at things like productivity or the common goals that we have as a group but not working out, it might be because of this. It might be because the intention, purpose, and commitment doesn't align.
Mm.
Um, and so therefore the outcomes are not going to occur. And so that's where when I see us like have a KPI that isn't working or that we're not getting to, then it opens up the door for why. And
Mhm.
I think maybe it's because there's each person has like a different maybe priority or like
Yeah.
way of doing things. And so when we make collective team goals, we have to do it with a commitment and a purpose and an intention that we all align with in order to see productivity.
And I think as I'm hearing us again, and like I always have these aha moments of, because we talked about priority and boundaries is kind of like our next meeting of like, that's what I'm hearing you say right now too, is maybe priority to you might seem like it's different than my priority, but I think, or what I've observed is we all are saying and wanting the same thing. It's the way that it looks or the perspective from my view might look different as far as how I describe that. But really, at the end of the day, and every time we meet as a group, like directors or whoever, we'll just say director meeting, is we all want consistency. We all want ease and predictability. We all want to have some fun in there too. That might look different for all of us, right? But it's still, we all have those same needs. And it just is, again, strategy. Go back to our training, trainings of that looks different. Strategies might look a little different based off of the department, our day to day, but the need is always the same. So let's prioritize as a group, uh, by those three different kind of hierarchies, if you want to call it that, of let's collaborate, let's coach each other through it, and then we're gonna make a decision, and that's our commitment. And we will take that step. And maybe I think what we got to continue to keep reminding each other is it's due by this date, or this is what our goal is for the, so there's a beginning and end because that's the boundaries that we all kind of strive for. Um, in life, I think even though we're curious and we like fun and we like to kind of, where that looks different for everybody, we all kind of want those boundaries of like, what's the end? What's the
Yeah.
beginning? What's the end? Or break it up so there's steps and processes for that. Again, the system. What's
Mm-hmm.
the system? Would you say?
Yeah.
Yeah. So look at that. Look at all of our trainings keep coming together, Nicole.
Great. Love that.
So awesome. I mean, that I think is a lot of teamwork.
Uh-huh.
It's a lot of steps and processes and yeah, so we would definitely recommend this book. You
Mm-hmm.
can't see it because it's all fuzzy.
Yeah.
But anything else that you wanted to talk about with teamwork?
No, I think we covered a lot.
Yeah, we did. So yeah, so now we've gotten through that's what our we've gotten through a lot of I think we only have one or two different values left, right?
Yep.
Yep. So we're almost there, getting through all the different values. And what would be very interesting is in a year or two or whatever to go over like if they've changed. I'm kind of curious with that. Um but yeah, I think that's it. And thank you for joining us on the scoop, and we'll see you next time. Bye.